Greetings, my Rantians. Hope you all are doing well today, and welcome to another tier list using the mega awesome tier maker. We're going to be talking about all of the items in Anno 1800, and I'm going to warn you from now, there are hundreds of items in this game. So, in order for us not to be watching a 6-hour long video all at once, I have decided to split them up between the different rarities in the different locations. Sometimes we might potentially have the uncommons and the rares in one video, or we could have the epics and legendaries in one video. Alternatively, we can just have the epics in one video. It really depends on how many items are there and how much I really want to be talking about them, because I do want to do my best to be as thorough as possible. Along with that, from time to time, I do have the tendency I'm referring to these guys as specialists. So if you hear that, do note that I'm still referring to the individual that we're talking about as an item, but I do like to also call them specialists from time to time. Finally, naturally, tier maker, tier lists, all that stuff comes with, we might have a difference of opinion, but you know what? That's totally fine. We'll talk about it. Let's just always be respectful. You guys already are, so I'm not going to say anything more about that. If you're new here, please consider checking out the channel. Be quite penetrated by your kindness. If you take a look at the Anno 1800 Expert Campaign series that just ended, and that is, we have roleplay incorporated in it, so if you're interested in checking it out, 195 episodes right over there. There's also some scenarios if you want to check those out too, along with some new gameplays happening right now, some new Let's Plays, one on Tropico 5 and the other one on Civilization 7 with Emperor Augustus. So the criteria with the common level trade union items. Now you might be saying to yourself, man, it's a common item. Why should I care about these? Hold the phone. Some of these common items can actually be used all throughout the game. You don't even need to go a step further for like the epics or the legendaries. You can, once you get to them, of course, but they can last for a long time. So what we're going to be essentially doing is longevity style, like how is this particular item going to work for us? What will they in fact do? And if they're actually going to be useful. Some of them are garbage. Most of them can be, actually. But what they can be, and on the flip side, is a good way of you actually making a little bit of cash. Because early game, you're going to be struggling a little bit with your maintenance costs, dealing with those horrid royal taxes. And you can just get rid of these from like quests that you do. So I have my nifty little cheat sheet over here because I must be very honest with you. I don't remember what each one of them do. So I know what a majority of them do, but not every single one, because quite frankly, I don't like to use individual ones of them sometimes. I kind of like to figure out what would be the best way of me breaking the game with optimization. So without further ado, let's just go into it. Our tier list is from fantastic all the way to just sell them and you just get rid of them. Somewhat okay, it's kind of like in between here. You can use them for some time, but once their usefulness is done, just sell them. Truth be told, once you're done with these items, you can always just sell them, or if you do have the Land of the Lions DLC, you can always donate them for research points, which that one is probably the better option. Getting research points so you can find the better quality of specialists and items are going to be really, really crucial to your game, but that again is a DLC. Console players do not have access to that one. Alrighty, so let us begin with the bag of money. And I'm going to be very frank with you, just sell this thing. Here's the problem. I personally hate items and specialists, they're items in this regard, that have a time duration. This thing has a time duration of 50 minutes, and it reduces the chance of riots by 40% in the vicinity, okay? Now, I'm not sure why this is in fact over here, but it is indeed put into a trade union for all production buildings. You would think that this one would be better in a town hall, but it's in fact right over here. And you might want to use this in a spot that, for example, you are mass producing on steel beams or advanced weapons. You put this in there because they've been rioting at least like 2 or 3 times and you're done with it. You can activate it, but it only goes on for 50 minutes and then it's done. I personally don't like using these items because I already feel there's enough stuff in Anno 1800 to micromanage. And I really don't want to be paying attention to something that's going to run out of time. I would like to just put an item into the socket and have it run indefinitely, with myself knowing in the back of my mind it's still working for me, whilst at the same time knowing that I don't really have to do much else about it unless I need to upgrade it to a better item. On the flip side, going to the Baker. The Baker is an absolutely fantastic common level item. Look at the disparity just there. First two items. He's fantastic. The bag of money sucks. Here's the thing with the Baker. He replaces the input for your lovely bakeries from flour to just grain. You're completely cutting out a production slot. There are three buildings you have to place in order to make some bread. You need the grain fields or the wheat fields, then you need the flour mills, and then you have the baker. You're cutting out the flour mills entirely. You know how long you can go through the game by just doing that? You never even have to replace this man. It's very simple to do that. Especially, the cool thing here is, let me take it from this route. If you have a grain field, and then you also have the baker, their time is actually 1-to-1. So that's really good. If you do have Bright Harvest DLC, then you'll be using the tractors. And the tractors are going to give you 200% yield on those. So you'll be naturally making a lot more of the wheat and grain coming out of these farms. So you'll be able to produce it more in the bakeries by completely cutting out the flour mill. Flour later on can be useful in other spots. So you don't really want to necessarily completely get rid of not using a flour mill at all. But he is a really good item to use early game to get some bread production going in a time where every maintenance cost, every penny is going to count. Very, very good item right over here. The Bean Sifter. The Bean Sifter, I consider them to be on the good end of things. Like, it really, they work with the coffee roasters. And truth be told, you're going to need coffee a lot later on. And what this person does just reduces the workforce by 20%. I mean, okay. If you're fine with that, that's okay. I personally like to see some productivity boosts, honestly, like get boosted up by like 10%, by 15%, then it would be worthwhile. But you can honestly like probably get rid of this particular item or specialist. Having workforce reductions on an island that you're working for and working on actively is not too bad. On the flip side, I believe it's 150 obreras that are needed in a coffee roaster. Do note that this person also does work in the advanced coffee roaster if you do decide to build them in the old world. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't consider them to be a fantastic specialist to use. The Boilermaker. The Boilermaker is also, I think it's really subjective on the time that you're using him. So I'm going to honestly be like somewhat okay-ish. Here's what he does. He just reduces the maintenance costs for your steelworks. That could be somewhat okay. Now, the reason why it can be is those buildings tend to be pretty expensive in the worker tier. You're definitely not making enough money at that time to really mass produce them. But at the same time, it's not really adding to their productivity value. That is what you really want to focus on, in my opinion, with the steelmakers. Steelmakers produce steel beams once every 45 seconds, if I remember correctly. And they need 300 workers in one of the steelworks to function. Just reducing its maintenance costs can help you out a little bit here and there, but I feel like you're just going to be tacking on more maintenance costs from another source. And then when you get rid of this man, then you're just going to be like, well, hell, where the hell did all my money go? Because now I've gone back into the red by removing this guy. I mean, it's by 30%. So if you're kind of pressed for time and you want to just like calm it down a little bit and mass produce on the steel beams to sell them, that's a different story. I don't think they go for a bunch. And because it's a construction resource, I wouldn't recommend you doing that anyway. So definitely take the Boilermaker with a grain of salt. I personally wouldn't really care too much about him. The burner is an interesting specialist, I would actually put him in good, borderline worthwhile. Now, the cool thing that he does is he does indeed, you know what, I am going to put him in worthwhile. The thing that he does is he increases the productivity boost bonus of the charcoal kilns by 10%. And that is pretty good to start off. I want that known. Charcoal kilns will produce some charcoal for you once every 30 seconds. So him just providing a little bit more of a boost towards them, that could be fantastic in the long run. Especially when you have chains that are working very tirelessly. Like, let's say you have a whole bunch of the furnaces working. You're going to need a bunch of coal. These things producing more coal for you is always really, really good. You can use coal in multiple different sources. For example, later on, you can use it for filaments. Stocking up on coal is never a bad thing. I personally like to stock up on mountain mine resources and stockpiles because you never know where you're going to actually need it. A lot of the replacement inputs in this game actually get changed out with, for example, iron, coal, zinc, and copper. Those things, they can be changed in like particular items. Such an example can be that like later on for the fur coat dealers, you can get an item that completely changes the input of both the stuff that you need in there, from cotton fabric and furs to wool and iron, as an example. So I believe him to be a worthwhile specialist as a common level item, simply because of the fact that he increases the productivity of the building. I really like productivity boosts. The butcher, I kind of the same as the Boilermaker. He just reduces the workforce of the slaughterhouses by 20%. I don't care. I don't care about that, because honestly, you need to expand. You need to grow your settlements out more. And having workforce reductions is just going to screw with you, in my opinion, later on. That being said, or at least early to mid-game, later on, because your population is going to skyrocket based off of you going and colonizing other islands and expanding your population sizes, that is when you can put in specialists to reduce the workforce limit. But that's the only thing that he's doing. He's not providing you with any other incentive besides saying, yeah, I don't need Bill, George, and Johnny. Get out of here. That's it. Literally nothing else is happening in the slaughterhouses. The canner is literally the exact same, reducing the workforce need in the canneries. Canneries really... You don't really want to be focusing on workforce reductions when it comes to the canneries at all. What you just really want to be working with the canneries is just the fact of producing the damn good itself. I mean, early game canneries are just, or when you have them being mid game in artisans, is just hell in and of itself, because getting the red peppers, their timer is awful. The cattle farms, their timer is awful. Putting it into the artisanal kitchen, which has a different timer value than the cannery itself, it literally, you just want to bash your head up against the wall. So workforce reduction in this, not in the grand scheme of things. The next person is the Carpenter, and the Carpenter occasionally produces some extra goods for us, and that is something that is indeed worthwhile. And he could be put into all carpentry works. There's a lot of gray area when this game mentions that all carpentry works. What classifies as a carpentry work? Well, we know it's going to be woodworking. So, as an example, you could put them in the place to make the wood veneers. That's one of the carpentry works. You can put them in the sawmill. That's obvious. You can put them for windows. Fantastic. So you put this guy in there, him producing some extra wood for you every third cycle is not bad, because a lot of buildings later on can utilize the wood that can come from extra goods from this gentleman. Never, ever, ever sleep on specialists in this game that will provide you with extra goods. You never know where those goods can come in handy. And hypothetically, let's say this person is overproducing on so much wood, we can literally ship off all this wood towards another island that has a whole bunch of sawmills, and that would be the location that, for example, you want to get your timber, you'll get it from there. If you want to, for example, later on, you can even change the inputs of your spectacle makers to brass and wood. So you can have some wood coming out from this gentleman. It's not going to obviously completely manage it over there, but it would definitely help. It's not a significant amount that he's providing every third cycle, but it's still not bad. It really also depends, because if you put electricity, for example, to the sawmill, it'll be one timber, I believe it's every 15 seconds, unless you put more specialists to it. So, truth be told, you can be making a lot of wood, extra wood coming out from those sawmills, and it works with every individual building. It's not just one of them that's going to produce the extra. No, let's say you have 8 or 9 sawmills around that trade union with this guy in there. Every single one of them, every third cycle, are going to provide you with 1 extra ton of timber. Or, I'm sorry, of wood, which is really powerful. The Cellar Man, this guy affects the champagne cellars, and again, it's workforce reduction. At this point, look, Cellar Man, I'm sorry, you're dealing with champagne. Champagne comes at investors, okay? By the time you're at investors, you're more than likely not going to even want to entertain this man being in a trade union pertaining to your champagne cellars. There's just no point. There are a lot of better specialists out there that will do his job better. So he's pretty much just like the doorman here. If, by all intents and purposes, you do have him and you are at that stage in the game, you don't have any other item for the champagne cellars, then yeah, he can be bumped up to good, because at that point, you are trying to build up your investor population. So if you don't have enough artisans which are used in the champagne cellars, then yeah, you can definitely use this guy for the workforce reduction being 25%. But overall, I just put him in somewhat okay-ish. The Chandler, I believe this is how you say this guy. I just sell him. Here's the thing: the reason why you want to get rid of this guy is it's mostly for the soap factory, and the return on this guy being the maintenance costs of the soap factories themselves. It doesn't really matter if you're using the strategy that you're going to be selling a whole bunch of soap to Eli early game. You won't need this man. You're going to be making enough money from that trade route for so long. His whole reduction in the maintenance costs in the soap factories is going to be completely pointless. And they're not even that expensive to really maintain. They can pack a little bit of a punch, but remember, each ton of those soap that you're selling is over 300 coins a piece. So you'll be making a killing by doing that if you mass produce it, and I highly recommend that you mass produce soap early game and sell it off to Eli en masse. The Confectioner is a pretty decent item, and I definitely put her in worthwhile because she affects the productivity of a lot of New World type production buildings like the chocolate, the cacao plantations. If you have the hacienda ones, it also affects those ones. And for the sugarcane would be fantastic because you want to try to mass produce on that a little bit for rum. People in the old world are going to pay out the wazoo for rum, so the more you make of it, the better. And she will definitely be able to help you out with that. Not a whole bunch. I mean, 10% is just like, whatever, it's a little bit, but you know what? A little bit goes a long way. With the sugarcane farms, the thing is that they're going to produce sugarcane for you once every 30 seconds. So her helping him out is probably going to be like at around, I don't know, 25 to 27 roughly seconds to produce some extra sugarcane for you. A little bit faster, it won't produce an extra ton, but it will definitely help you make a little bit more. The next one is the Cropper, and the Cropper is going to go again here in Worthwhile because she does the exact same thing as the Confectioner over here, which is a productivity boost with the grain farms and the red peppers. Now, as we mentioned, red pepper farms are terrible with their timers. Is she going to completely fix the situation? No, she won't. But can she help? Yes, absolutely. Perhaps she can help enough to build one less red pepper farm. Just a little bit. It's only by 10%, but it still goes a long way. On the other hand, you can use her for the grain farms, and the grain farms will definitely take more. You know, it'll be a lot better with them, obviously. So, like, for example, this one and this one, they can work together perfectly. Really good. The next one is the Dig Lady, and she works with the bauxite mines, the clay pits, limestone, anything like that. Really, because it's a mine, productivity with these ones, I kind of tend to find them to be a lot better than your grain farms because they're normally faster. So, if you want to get more stuff out, and especially in the age of industrial revolutions and a whole bunch of factories, you're going to need more steel, right? So I actually consider her to be a fantastic early game common level specialist. Really, really good person to have. 10% productivity boost. You work him for the bauxite mines, which are in the New World, but the clay pits too, and the limestone quarries, those two, they can definitely take advantage of having a 10% boost. 100%. The driller is relatively the same, but except his are a little bit different. His focus on bauxite mines, saltpeter works, and sand mines. So we're talking more so the shoreline type production goods. And I honestly, like, at this point, because I have to be very frank here, using Docklands, it does really cheese the system, but altogether, if you want to use this man, if you don't have Docklands, he would be at Fantastic. If you do have Docklands, we'll put him in Worthwhile. But we'll put him at the front of the pack here in Worthwhile. The bauxite mines only if you have DLCs, I believe that's where they're active, but the sand mine and the saltpeter works are definitely going to get a boost with this gentleman in there, especially the saltpeter works, because they take over a minute. I think they're actually at a minute to process goods for 1 ton, so more worthwhile there. The Dynamite stick, sell this thing. It is another time duration thing, and this is for productivity in your mountain mines for a duration of time being 2 hours. Again, I don't like using duration type items, but on the flip side, if it did not have a time duration to it, this thing would be in Fantastic because it's a 100% productivity bonus. On the other hand, it is a 50% increased chance of explosions in those particular mines. So I probably would be more on the worthwhile train, but I would just consider selling this because you really don't want to be micromanaging items like these in the game, personally, but I'd leave it up to you. And it can work in every single mine that you have over here. The Glassblower, he's also one that can assist with the productivity bonus 10%. I'm going to put him again in Worthwhile, but this guy only affects the window makers. So truth be told, I might actually put him in good because by the time that you're at the window makers, you might actually be finding some better items that would be better than him and that would increase the productivity of said buildings by more than just 10%. But if you do randomly come across him, then sure, he will definitely be pretty useful to start off in the window makers. The hand-blown grenade, put this thing here, just sell it off. This one affects every single production building, and this one reduces the chance of fire for 40% for 50 minutes. Again, time duration, I'm not even going to bother explaining this one. The Handicrafter focuses on the sewing machine factories, and that is a workforce reduction. Now, here's the thing. Sewing machines are kind of important, not only for your artisans, but also for your engineers. This is probably one of the only common level, specialists that I'm actually going to put in good when it comes to workforce reductions, because it's by 20% in a place that is really high up on maintenance costs and actually needing a decent amount of artisans to work in. As opposed to the individuals that we had for the canneries, right? The canneries, you want to focus on actually producing the good. But for the sewing machine factory, it is very straightforward. You provide them with the wood, you provide them with the steel, they're going to produce the sewing machine. But having a reduction of people in those particular factories will help out, at least short term, in order for you to build up your population a little bit more, along with get more sewing machines out there so you can stockpile them until you find better items that will help you out with mass producing sewing machines. You can definitely mass produce sewing machines, and you can get items in this game that will passively provide you with sewing machines. So for all intents and purposes, reducing the workforce in this situation would work, in my opinion, if she is indeed good. The harvester, I would put him at good. He increases the productivity of the corn farms, sugarcane, tobacco, all those things in the new world by only 7%. He's not as good as the other ones up here being 10%. Uh, the only one I would probably consider him to really assist with is probably the tobacco farms, because those ones are pretty high up there on the time duration. I believe they're 2 minutes to actually process some tobacco leaves. That's a lot. Alternatively, you can also put it with the sugarcane, but sugarcane's already fast as is. Tobacco's where you're going to really need to put a lot of TLC into, because your investors are going to want a bunch of cigars. That's without a shadow of a doubt. The cigar factories will produce cigars very quickly, but actually growing the crop and providing it to those places are going to take the time. That's where you really want to focus optimization work. He's okay to start off. You know what? I'm actually going to put him here. He's somewhat okay, but I wouldn't really focus on him too much. The hat maker, he is actually worthwhile because it works very well with the alpaca farms, the bombin weavers specifically, because your obreras are going to want bombins later. And even if you have artistas, this guy can help. And his productivity by 10%, definitely a boon to have at that stage in the game. And I want to mention that some of these guys actually do look the same. That's not in something that I like duplicated in here. There are actually specialists and items in this particular game that look the exact same but function differently. Some of them have the exact same look, same face, same hat, but the color of their shirts are different, and they're two different people. I want that known. So these people, these guys, they're two different guys. It's not the same image that I duplicated twice. It literally going down the list here. The Inflammable Concoction, again, this is a item that's a time duration. I'm putting it down here. But if it didn't have the time duration, it is very similar to that of the Dynamite piece, being 100% productivity in the mountain mines that you do have for 2 hours. If it didn't have that time duration, it would be fantastic, but it unfortunately does. But the explosion chance goes up by 50%. So like if you stack this one with the Dynamite, you know that mine is going to go sky high. I would not recommend that at all. The jeweler, I am actually just going to put this guy at somewhat okay. Reason is you will reach jewelry by the time you're at investors, and more than likely when you're at that stage, this gentleman becomes absolutely useless. There are significantly better items for jewelers, and like some that completely change the input. The productivity it skyrockets. As an example, the jewelers that I have in the expert campaign, they're producing jewelry like probably in the single second digits. That's how fast they're producing it. He just gets outclassed. He's only at 10%. So I'm putting at the bottom of this list. He can also probably just sell him, but it really depends. At that point in the game, if you don't have any other specialists for the jewelers, then sure, you can put him in there and he'll be totally fine. The kitchen help, I consider her to be worthwhile because it's productivity bonus with the cattle farms and the corn farms going into the tortilla makers. Now, tortilla makers they're pretty important in the new world because that's what your obreras are going to want as one of their main basic needs. Very similar to that of the fried plantain kitchen. So having somebody to help out with that is definitely good. The corn farms do produce corn slower, and I believe it is a minute for the cattle farm and the corn farm, but then the tortilla maker is at 30 seconds. So the timer is going to be a little bit skewed if you use her, but I honestly think in the grand scheme of things, anybody that helps out with the tortilla maker, considering how every single one of the obreras and later artistas, if you have them, are going to want them, this is not a bad specialist to have early game. The knitter, you know what? I'm gonna put them in good. The reason for this is it really deals with the poncho darner in the new world again. Ponchos are relatively easy to make. It's just put down the alpaca farm, put down the poncho darner. They're gonna produce both 1 ton every 30 seconds, so it's a 1-to-1 ratio. You don't really have to screw with it a lot. So having this person kind of mess with the chain a little bit if you don't have a silo attached to the alpaca farm that's a little bit spicy. I wouldn't really focus on this individual. If you have them, perfect. If you want to sell them, great. But if you want to mass produce on ponchos, then you can potentially use this person. But I will tell you, again, they're significantly better. Common level items are just a means to an end. Later on, when you get better specialists, they'll outclass every single one of them. The only one that I would say they don't get outclassed for a while is that guy with the bakers. 100% him. The Lector. The Lector, he is good as well. You know what? He could be worthwhile. I'll tell you why he's worthwhile. Because he would help out with the cigar factories. It would increase their time duration. Or, I'm sorry, decrease their time duration by putting on the productivity boost of 10%. So, you want to produce some more cigars? That's pretty good. On the flip side, you do also have to bear in mind that your tobacco farms are not going to be producing a bunch of tobacco very fast, especially if you do not have tractors and if you don't have manure to actually get a fertilizer silo going to really help them out as much as possible. You know, that's the only problem that you're going to run into with that particular chain. Their timers are really wonky. The Lineman. The Lineman is actually a really interesting one. For the oil power plants and the power stations, he will reduce the maintenance cost. I think at that point in the game, you should probably have your finances somewhat okay-ish, but do I believe that this gentleman can be worthwhile? Absolutely. I think the maintenance costs with those power plants can definitely help, but actually, now that I'm thinking about it, he would just be good. Here's the real reason. You don't want to have, in my opinion, like a trade union put around a single power plant. And the spacing of power plants that you put across your islands need to be pretty much the extent of the other one's radius for maximum coverage. So you put a trade union down, it'll only be set for one of those power plants. It's not going to affect one that's not within its radius. So if he reduces the maintenance costs on one, that's all well and good. But in the grand scheme of things, having a whole bunch of him to reduce the maintenance costs for every single one of them and putting a trade union next to every single one of those power plants, that's a little bit too much. That is one particular chain that I would just recommend don't ever really optimize too much. So in the grand scheme of things, if you see him and you really are pressed for cash, you can sell him or you can use him for a trade union. Also remember, when you put down a trade union, it costs resources and influence. If you don't have a stable source to farm influence, you really need to reconsider and think strategically on where you're going to be putting the trade unions down. The Lumberjack is pretty decent. I'm actually going to put him in worthwhile. Put him in like the middle of the pack here. Increasing the productivity of Lumberjack huts, and also if you do have the Land of the Lions DLC, he can be used in Beza with the Wands of Timber. So if they're not at 30 seconds, they'll be at like 25 to 27. That's still okay. He's not going to do significant work for you, but he'll definitely be able to help you out just a little bit. The Mason reduces the maintenance costs of the concrete factories. That is good. Concrete factories do tend to be necessary for reinforced concrete as a building resource, but the actual building itself can get a little bit pricey, especially when you're trying to get like maybe 4 or 5 of them going at any given time. So her being early game, or at least at that point, when you get to reinforced concrete, it's in engineers. If you do happen to have her, she can be useful as a stepping stone towards a better specialist that comes in and takes her place. But reducing the maintenance costs of those particular buildings, I believe it's good. The mechanic is going to work with the bicycle factories and reduces the workforce requirement. I don't. Honestly, I'd say sell this guy. He just, I don't know. The bicycle factories, they've never posed that much of a problem, and you don't need that many of them. So having somebody that reduces the workforce only is not worthwhile in that particular building, in my mind. In my mind, that building requires more productivity bonuses because of how many people like literally crash and burn their bicycles every single day. Because they can go through penny farthings like no tomorrow in this game. Dude literally purchased it from the bike shop, okay? He'll ride it for like 30 seconds and then it's gone. Then he'll be like, all right, I gotta go get me another one. That's literally how it is. They go through it that fast. Same with coffee. I know two different things, but that's just kind of how it works. The miner is insane as a common level item. He increases the productivity of your mountain mines by 20%. Dude, put him up here. He belongs up here. 20% in those places is absolutely incredible. And I also highlighted up low. Absolutely incredible for coal mines, copper mines, gold, the iron mines, limestone quarries, all those. And they're already fast to begin with. This guy just makes them faster. And that is incredible. Really, that's what you're trying to aim for. The better and faster you can get the goods is just really what makes the optimization game so much fun, in my opinion. You're just breaking the timer values. The time, it just becomes a figment of your imagination at that point. You can literally be looking at, for example, later on, an oil refinery. Before, it's telling you that it's going to be processing some oil for you like once every 5 seconds. You can reduce that thing down to 1 second every single time. Bam, 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 oil coming out. Every single one of your oil harbors going to be full to the brim with oil. Done. This guy is like a very good precursor into what you can get later. But I have a feeling that you can use him for quite some time just because of that productivity boost with a bunch of mountain mines. He's very versatile for the old world, Cape Trelawney, if you do have sunken treasures. If not, then you have the new world. Fantastic over there as well. The mixer for the artisanal kitchen, garbage. Get rid of her. Don't even bother reducing maintenance costs. Here's the thing. You want to cut out the artisanal kitchen entirely. The moment that you do that, let me tell you, there are very, 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 very few reasons why you need goulash in this game. I'm being very honest with you. Goulash and the artisanal kitchen, useless. It can be useful later on if you want to, I don't know, get the World's Fair going, I think, or even with the stadium in the new world with stadium as DLC. Apart from that, why the hell do you need goulash? You don't. That's the answer. The Moonshiner. The Moonshiner, interesting person. As you can see, the exact same design. Same design, same facial expression, same thing on clothes, but her effectiveness is definitely worthwhile, I believe, because of how many places that she can help in. 10% productivity boost for places like the brewery to get some more beer out, or even in the schnapps distilleries, because schnapps at this point, early game, you can provide it to not only the farmers but the workers, but you can also probably put this in, your rum distilleries. You can put it, if you have the hacienda, definitely work with the haciendas. She can help out in multiple different areas. She will get outclassed. Every single one of these guys will get outclassed, I should mention. But she can be useful for quite some time and is a worthwhile common level trade union item to utilize. The Moulder can also be pretty worthwhile, in my opinion, considering the productivity boost when it comes to the brick factories. And really, the brick factories, here's how it works. Like, if you're making bricks without any items, one clay pit will be able to put together 2 brick factories. That's how it works. One clay pit's 30 seconds, and then the brick factories are a minute each. This guy will reduce the timer a little bit, so it would skew the clay pit just a bit, but altogether, the more bricks you make early game, the better, in my opinion, because then you can pave a lot of your roads, your services will go farther, they'll go faster, it looks cleaner than the dirt roads. I think this gentleman's worthwhile. Humble opinion. Pastry Cook, maintenance costs of fried plantain kitchens. Sell her. I don't need to go any further with that. It's only 60% reduction. Those buildings aren't really that expensive. Not worth. Just if you find her, be like, hey, I respect you. You are a renowned personage, but thank you so much. We do not require your services. Isabel would take you, and just go ahead and sell her off to Isabel. Then you'll make some quick cash. The picker at the same time is kind of the same. Yeah, I'm gonna put her in just sell. What she does with regards to like the farms, while it is a productivity boost, I'm going to be very, very honest with you. The stuff that she helps with need a lot more TLC than just 7%. That is coffee plantations, caoutchouc plantations, the hacienda type stuff. If you want to put her with plantains, that's a different story. That means that she'd be somewhat okay. But plantains come out once every 30 seconds. So you don't really need to have a whole bunch of those. You'll be able to produce enough plantains for quite some time and it'll be stable. And you don't really need a specialist like her to kind of skew with the timer. In fact, in my opinion, she would screw it up more than she would help, because changing one of those timers from everything being 30 second, 30 second, 30 second is just going to be like, okay, now I have to build two of this one in order to make one of that. It just, you don't want to go through that mental gymnastics with this person, so don't even bother. The Ploughman. The Ploughman, 10% productivity boost when it comes to the potato farms. Same spot. I just think that I just phase out potatoes farms and schnapps distilleries very quickly in this game. It's, again, a means to an end just to keep people happy on my main island. Can he be useful on an island that you only have farmers and workers on? Sure, but in the grand scheme of things, nah, don't even bother. The Poacher. Okay, this guy is very worthwhile. Borderline fantastic. Because the hunting cabins are slow to produce fur, especially when you need fur freaking coats for people that don't give a damn that you're taking your sweet time in order to make them. So, 10% productivity boost when it comes to the hunting cabins, a good supplementary specialist to have in the trade union when pertaining to this particular building, but will he be replaced by someone who's far better, with like someone who will increase the productivity by 40%? Yeah, but if you don't have that person and the fur coats are unlocked with artisans and you have this gentleman, get him. He is a good guy that will help you at least 10%. It's not a lot, but it will go a long way in the grand scheme of things. The Prospector. The Prospector is interesting. Maintenance cost reduction on oil wells and oil refineries. Somewhat okay. Those ones can typically be a little bit of a cash suck from time to time, especially if you have a New World island that has a bunch of oil wells. Yeah, this guy can help, but he's like borderline just sell him. Borderline. Again, at this point, you are in engineers, so you will be making money. The maintenance cost reduction on those, in my opinion, not really that worthwhile. You're going to be having to pay for the goods anyway. You're going to have to be paying for the ship that's going to take the oil over. Having a little bit of reduction, I mean, that's really if you want to micro it, but there are a lot better items for oil refineries, and I will tell you about those ones when we get to them in a subsequent video. The Rum Runner. I actually think that she's a worthwhile specialist, and I'm putting her kind of at the beginning here because she's like borderline fantastic, because she definitely does help out with the rum distilleries. And again, rum is that one item that is really, really, really good to provide to your old world settlements for artisans and engineers, because they'll pay a decent amount for them. But what I recommend is that you block it off from the obreras and the jornaleros when you have them in the new world, because they're just not going to pay enough. You want to make sure that your old world provinces are actually happier. So this lady helping us out with extra productivity being 10%, again, it's not a bunch, it's not a whole bunch, but she will definitely be able to help us out with the rum, provide it to our people a lot faster, and that means we won't ever have to see them go from a somewhat content face to an unhappy face. That means danger. The Shepherd, when it comes to pretty much every single farm, 10% productivity boost is okay. I kind of dig this gentleman. It really also depends on which one you're using him in. Like the alpaca farms, I really wouldn't say use them in alpaca farms. They're too fast already. They're at 30 seconds. And if you have a silo, let's say for all intents and purposes, let's take it from the console point of view. If you have a trade union, you have the alpaca farms and you have the poncho darners, they're already working at 30 seconds. So unless you're significantly changing both, then I wouldn't recommend it. But If you have a silo attached to the alpaca farm, and then you want to put this guy in there, then you're going to be getting so much alpaca wool that you can actually passively sell it. It's not going to go for a whole bunch, but you can do that. On the flip side, you can put him in other places like the pig farm. Pig farm, he would actually be useful. These pig farms, if you don't have a silo, are 1 minute processing time each. So not a bad specialist. He's definitely good. Sparky, for workforce reductions for the cable factory and light bulb factory, trash. Don't even bother. At that point, you're in engineers. You're going to be getting a lot better specialists that are going to help you than just reducing the workforce, and that's it. People want light bulbs. You're going to have to work on those, and reducing the workforce is not going to help you. It's just not. Don't even bother with this gentleman. The spectacle maker, again, maintenance costs reduction for the spectacle factories. Again, put her down here. Just sell her off. Maintenance costs and workforce reductions, it is subjective based off of what is happening in your game, but based off of my experience, I don't just use one particular specialist to just reduce one thing, unless that one thing is so powerful, like this guy with the mines. That's a different story. This is not going to do anything for you. The tanner, fur dealers having productivity by 10%. This guy is worthwhile. Fur coats are always going to be necessary. The only problem with the fur coats is actual optimization of the fur coat dealers. Early game, or I guess, well, when you get them, it's mid-game. They're going to be quite on the needy side because they need cotton fabric, and they're also going to need some furs in order to produce the fur coats. But let's say you changed out one of those inputs, so like the cotton fabric is changed to wool, and from that point onward, all you need is just the stuff from the old world in order to make some fur coats. So I can tell you that later on, mass producing on fur coats is definitely a very lucrative business offer that you can have, because Madame Kahina will purchase a lot of fur coats for almost 1,000 coins each. So this gentleman can definitely help jumpstart your production and make it possible for your buildings not to constantly stop working, but at the same time, make sure you have a good ship bringing in the resources, because those guys, they're already working at 30 seconds a piece. So you put this guy in there, they're just going to reduce the timer, and you're going to need more goods and a faster ship to bring this stuff over. The technician, the workforce requirement reduction by 20% of the fan factory, gramophones, and motor assembly plants. Just by listening to those factories and what this gentleman can do, he is garbage. I don't care about it, especially now, because, like, let's take it from the PC player. You have all of the DLCs, and you now have the option to share your workforce in the new world between your islands. I ask you, if you have almost every single one of those damn things colonized, you have thousands and thousands of workforce, do you really want to have just somebody reducing the workforce by 20% on a fan factory? No, you don't. But on the flip side, the gramophones, going now to the console player. On the gramophones, it can potentially help just for a little bit, but it's not enough to put him in somewhat okay. Just get rid of them, because the gramophones, you are going to have to optimize those things to high hell for them to actually be worthwhile, that you can mass produce and sell off or provide to your people as they would want it as a happiness need. The Vintner. The Vintner is interesting. I actually consider her to be worthwhile. Now, here's the thing. The Vintner and the vineyards, they have a terrible timer. 2 minutes. They're the exact same as a tobacco plantation. The thing with this is that when you reach this point, sure, you may or may not have some better specialists or items that are going to help you with those particular vineyards. But in my experience, you kind of tend to forget that farms actually exist by the time you reach that point. You kind of want to be focused, or your mind, at least my mind, tends to focus on, like, these are the heavy industries, this is what I need to produce, and this is how I need to do it. When it comes to the vineyards, I tend to forget them. And now that I have, all the DLCs and all that good stuff, I tend to put like a tractor to them, 200% productivity boost, and then later a fertilizer silo, an additional 100%. So those vineyards are going to be producing very, very quickly. But in the respect that you don't have those, having 10%, even a little bit of productivity boost on a vineyard, it will help you out. And she will definitely be able to help you out until you find some better specialists that will be able to outclass her. The Watchmaker reduces workforce of clockmakers. Trash. We're not even going to cover it much. Clockmakers are... Actually, I will cover it a little bit because this is actually important. Clockmakers, you can completely change the input of gold to brass. So that's one. You want to definitely have a specialist that's going to do that. He's taking up that spot. Second, by the time you reach the clockmakers and when you have it fully optimized, you are in investors. You are making heaps of money. He is going to be useless. Sell him off. The Weaver. The Weaver is interesting. I can sense her being in good. Yeah. So 10% productivity boost when it comes to, like, let's say the framework knitters. Okay, that's good. But again, that's going to kind of screw with your timers with getting, the sheep farms down 30 seconds for those and then putting a framework knitter down. That is going to mess with it. So like 20 seconds, there'll be less than 30 seconds naturally because the productivity is going up. You would actually have to have a 2-to-1 ratio. It would be very skewed. Not bad to have early game, I guess, but if you're not the type of person that really wants to optimize the framework knitters a lot, sell her off. But in the grand scheme of things, I consider it to be good. The Welder reduces maintenance costs by 30% on the bomb factory, heavy weapons factory, sea mine factories, and weapons factories. Trash. Get rid of her. Maintenance costs for those ones. Let me be very, very clear. When you're making heavy weapons, you better have some good specialists because the timer is atrocious. You can bring those things down to at least lower than 30 seconds. That's number one. Number two, having the specialists be better for the weapons factories, that means that you can actually trade them more, and they're pretty expensive, and you want to be making a whole bunch of better ships at that point. So this person's going to be useless. Alternatively, the weapons factory, I don't really think... I mean, it is a very lucrative trade option to have with Isabel Sarmento. That you sell her a whole bunch of weapons. She'll purchase them for over 900. But not worth having somebody reduce the maintenance cost by 30%. Get productivity bonuses into those buildings. That'll be a lot better. Workforce reductions coupled with productivity bonuses at the same time, even better. With those factories that you want to mass produce, workforce reduction is useless. And finally, the Wheelwright, of whom reduces the workforce requirement to cab assembly line. That can be taken either way, but given the time of the game, the cabs that you're providing to people is at the very end of what an investor wants. You better have like a lot of money and all that good stuff and be able to completely phase this guy out. I could honestly see him at somewhat okay, but in the grand scheme of things, I actually think just get rid of him is probably the better option. More so because he's just not going to be worthwhile at that time. That factory is very fast. So you want to... For example, there's a specialist named Maria, and she's a rare. That she will change the input of the steam motors in the factory to just the motors that you can produce in the new world. Sorry, and this has come from DLC. And you will be able to passively make an extra cab every couple cycles. That is somebody that you want to have, not somebody that just reduces the workforce requirement. So this is the end of the common level trade union items. Naturally, you can use these guys in different areas and really just based off of the parameters that you have set your game in and what you're focusing on. You could honestly follow this list to the letter. You don't need to follow it. You can argue a certain one of these should be indeed and worthwhile. Some of them should be fantastic. Some of the worthwhile should be in just sell. There's a lot of, gray area. There's a lot of room for debate here. But I do want to mention that these guys are primarily designed to get them fast, help out with initial optimizations, and then phase them out. But these three up here, they are very good to have for a long campaign, especially on a place that either you're mass producing on the bread, for example, with this guy, bread is going to be something that you're going to even need if you have DLCs. The tourists are going to want it. So mass producing on bread and making it easier for yourself, this guy will definitely help you out. The mountain mines, 20% productivity bonus on mountain mines with a common level is crazy when you want to mass produce steel. It's absolutely insane. Even with the brass smelteries, if you want to put them with the zinc and the copper mines, holy moly, you'll be making a whole bunch of them out of there. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this and learned something. If you need anything clarified, please let me know. Write in the comment section. I do respond to everyone's comments as much as I possibly can, so please do so. If you need anything, if you have any questions, or you want something else clarified, please let me know. But until next time, my friends, thank you so much. Please consider like, commenting, subscribing, hit that bell button, sharing it with your friends, and I'll catch you in the next episode, my Rantians.